Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Today we are going to paint this nice little cityscape right here, and we are going to paint it monochromatically. Say that 5 times fast. Anyways, we're going to paint it monochromatically, which means we're going to use one color. I'm going to use indigo, but you could use any dark color like Payne's Gray or dioxazine purple or like a sepia. Any of those colors would be great. Something like a yellow is too light. You don't want to start out with a yellow because then you can't go darker. But anyways, just a nice dark color, and it's a great exercise to be able to kind of develop your tonal values, the way that you see tonal values. So let's do this. Here are the materials for today. If I was you, I would just pause and screenshot it, but they're also listed in the description for you. Today I'm going to start out with a little bit of masking fluid, and my usual technique for that is to dip it into a solution of water and liquid dish soap before I dip it into the masking fluid to preserve my brushes. So I'm doing that, and then I am preserving the whitest of the whites here. So I'm preserving the lamp posts, the street lights, the lights that are along the side, over the storefronts, and the car, just because I don't want to have to paint around the car for right now. I've let that masking fluid dry completely. I always let it dry for at least 30 minutes, if not an hour or more, just to make sure that it's not going to bleed when you add water, because if it does that, then you'll never get any paint to stick where it bleeds. So just make sure it dries completely. So now I'm taking my 1.5 inch hockey brush, and I have wet the entire thing, and now I'm just letting it soak in for a second. And then I'm beginning to lay in a very, very watery value of this indigo to start with. You don't want to go too dark too quick, so this is very, very watery, and this is going to end up being the lightest areas of the painting, other than like the very whitest white parts like the lamps and the lights and things like that. So I'm just adding this color in, and I'm lifting out a few areas that I feel like it might have gotten a little bit dark. You don't want to go too dark too quick. That is just the main thing. Now I've mixed up a little bit thicker consistency of that indigo, and I'm adding it in this furthermost back corner. Now this is the darkest part of the upper building area, and I'm just going to add that in to create a little bit of shadow here in the back corner. Now you'll notice that throughout this entire painting I'm going to be using flat brushes, which I hardly ever use them, but for architecture and things like this, it actually comes in really handy. Now I'm adding a little bit darker of a stripe where these balconies are going to be positioned. And then I'm darkening up this area to the left. It just is a little bit too light, so I'm adding a little bit of color there. And a little bit darker to the far right. And I'm making sure to paint around the areas that are the lightest here. In this case, it's going to be right underneath the street light. So I'm painting around that to make sure it doesn't get too dark too quick. And now I'm adding some of these stripes of light on the road as well. And I felt like it was drying out a little bit, so I gave it a spray because I'm not ready for it to not diffuse yet. So in order to keep it diffusing, I gave it a spray, and now I'm continuing to drop in some of these colors in the darker areas. Correction, color, not colors, because it's all indigo, all of it. I probably should have said this before I started painting, but when you're working on one of these tonal value sketches, before you start painting, take a minute, look the whole thing over, determine where your very lightest lights are, where your very darkest darks are, and everything in between, and make sure you map that out in your mind before you start. You don't want to start off getting things too dark. You can always start light and make things darker, but once they're too dark, there's not a ton you can do. Now, since I'm painting this as wet on wet, a little bit of this darker color has spread a little bit too far into some of the lighter areas, so I'm taking my 1/2 inch flat brush and I'm lifting some of this color back out, which at this stage is really easy to do, especially with a nice blue, because they're really easy to lift usually. And I'm just bringing back in some of the light areas because I know that I don't want to lose those. Now around the street lights, I want there to be kind of a little bit of a halo of a glow where the light's coming from. So I'm lifting out kind of a circle around them, and that will actually flow out a little bit farther because of the water, and it should create a little bit of a glow. This first wash is done, and I'm just going to let that dry completely. Since it's dry, I'm just coming in with my 1/2" flat brush and with a darker wash of this, and I'm coming over this area that's in the back corner here. This is going to be the most shadowed area, and it's going to be the area that actually is able to show you the perspective in this place. It's going to be darkest towards the top, and I'm just blending down with clean water towards the street light where it's shining on the building and it is making it lighter. Making it a little bit darker on this right side, adding in a bunch of vague detail. I believe the British call that blagging it, but anyway, making it up as I go along a little bit. Painting around the light areas, making sure not to lose that light where the light is shining on the buildings, that kind of stuff. So if you look at the overall tonal values of the entire scene, I think the road itself is pretty much the mid-tone value, so we're darkening that up, getting darker closer to the bottom of it, adding in the streaks for the lighting, that kind of stuff right now. Now it's time to darken up this left-hand side, which is a little bit darker than the right-hand side if you look at the original photo. I'm just painting around the areas where the headlights of the car are hitting all of these open, kind of garage door looking windows. I'm sure they're probably storefronts with the things pulled down in front of them, whatever those things are called. But anyway, making sure to paint around the light, adding in some more dark, just getting all the major things blocked in here. And that's really all I'm doing right now, is just blocking things in. Now this is another one of those Pixabay photos where it did not say what city this is, but you can pretty much tell that it's somewhere in Europe because the street only looks wide enough for about one car. So it had to have been one of those cities that's really, really old and was built for the days when they had horse-drawn carriages and whatnot. Most of your American cities were built after that fact, so it's most likely European. Now that I have all the major colors blocked in, I'm coming back in and I'm adding some of these vague details like window openings. I'm darkening up this back corner because it's still not quite dark enough for my liking, and that kind of thing. And really, like I said, I'm just making a bit of this up. I'm following what's there, but I'm not making sure that every line is in the right place. I'm not, once you kind of get to that level of detail, it kind of turns it into more of an architectural drawing than a painting. So I'm kind of trying to be just loose with it. I'm just continuing to add in some of these extra details here, darkening some door frames, making sure that there's a lot of vertical lines. That's what's going to make this look like a city street as opposed to just a flat wall somewhere, all of the window openings, all of the door openings, all the balconies, that kind of stuff. We're just darkening all that up and making sure that it's all where it needs to be. I felt like the street area was not dark enough, so I'm just coming back in with another layer and darkening that up. And the back corner needs yet another darkening. It really has to stand out here. This is the part that's going to show everybody that there's an end to this street, and that building is part of the end and part of the side. So it does a turn right in the middle of the scene, and that is what's going to show everybody what's going on here. So okay, now that we have all the light tones and the mid tones done, I'm coming in with a very dark consistency of indigo. I mean, it's the color I've used the whole time, but anyway, very, very dark consistency of it, very little water in this, and I am just adding in all of the really dark things, like the garage door looking opening right behind the car, all of the railings. We're gonna do the light posts with this, and all of these little barriers, that kind of stuff. Just use it as dark as you can get it. Now the street light here, I'm going to start off pretty dark, but then I'm watering it down as I go further towards the light, and that's going to make it look like it's washed out because the light's shining on it. We're really darkening up this left-hand side. That's going to draw your eye into the focal point of the painting. Same thing for this light post back here. Start out darker, go a little bit lighter, and then go back to the really dark color for the post. If anyone happens to recognize this street and would like to tell me what city is, I would be eternally grateful. So drop it in the comments if you know. That would be fantastic. It's time to add in the figures on the left side of this. So I'm just using my tiny little chisel brush here, and I'm just blocking it in, really. Like, the more detailed you try to get, the stiffer it looks. So I'm kind of just, it's far enough away, I'm really just kind of blocking this in, and voila, it actually looks like a human form. Case in point, I feel like this little guy actually turned out a little stiffer than I wanted him to, but I think that's because I tried to put in too much detail. So there you go. Confession to make. The painting on this has seemed really, really easy, and it pretty much is. Just get some flat brushes and slap it in there. But the drawing on this one took me flipping forever, because I feel like you need an accurate drawing in order to make perspective work, and I made sure that my drawing was super accurate before I even started painting, and then it made the painting easy. So be forewarned on that, but I don't tend to do a lot of architectural drawings, so maybe that's just me. And now it's time to remove the masking fluid, and I do that with a rubber cement eraser. They are very, very handy and get it off very easily. It's kind of amazing how much the white stands out here, just the white of the paper. But anyway, I'm using my little chisel brush to lift out a little bit of the color around the light to make it have just a little bit of that halo that I was talking about earlier. It's time to throw some detail on this car here. I'm going to start out with a mid-range and do the entire windshield area, and then I'm going to let that dry and come back in with darker areas around it. And then I'm just modeling the car itself, making sure to paint around the headlights. We want that to really stand out like the rest of the light in the painting. And then knock back some of the stuff for the signage and for the things that are in the storefront. Just add some detail that's not really detail. And then we come back in and add all of the darkest details on the car. And like I said, this is mostly indigo, very little water, and just making sure that there's a nice shadow under the car as well, and the little details on the front and down the side, and there you go. Whatever kind of car this is. Maybe my husband could probably tell me, but I have no idea, so we'll just say it's a nice European car. Now it's time to make it look like the headlights are shining on the actual road itself. So I'm taking my 3/4 inch flat brush, I'm using some clean water, and I am dabbing that out. So we're just lifting a little bit of shine off the road. That's what we're doing here. Now this shadowed building in the back had a little bit of white detailing that kind of shows the perspective a little bit, but I lost it kind of. So I'm using an X-Acto knife to scratch it back down to the white of the paper. It's super easy to do, and there you go. You've got that perspective laid right back in there. And here's the finished product with all the tape removed and signed and all that kind of stuff. And I must say, I don't do many cityscapes. In fact, I'm not really sure I've ever done one, but I really do think this one came off successfully. I was honestly a little bit scared, but I think it works. It's got a lot of light, it's got a lot of dark, and you can see the perspective. And there you have it, a nice little exercise that will help you develop your tonal values. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all that stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.